They had never set foot on a battlefield, carried no weapons, and for years, no one believed that these two men could influence the global balance of power. Yet simply by transferring a few nuclear research formulas and technical documents, they helped a superpower cut several years off its race to build the atomic bomb. Klaus Fuchs, a German-born physicist who had settled in Britain, was a participant in the Manhattan Project, the top secret program run by the US and the UK. Harry Gold, a chemical technician in the US, was not directly involved in the science, but served as the courier link transporting information within the espionage network to the Soviet Union. One understood the impact of the knowledge he was providing while the other simply said he was following orders. Both were arrested in 1950 and charged with treason. But when placed side by side, the question becomes more complex. Who was truly more dangerous? The one who proactively shared knowledge with ideological conviction, or the cautious executor of the action who did not fully grasp its value? When a nation focuses on controlling military strategy but overlooks the supervision of intellectual knowledge, does the real threat come from the outside, or from the very people sitting quietly behind their desks? And if the security system fails to anticipate the behavior of an intellectual, could the lack of understanding by a small link in the chain be the starting point of a major global change? Part 2. People on the same line. Understanding, or obeying. Klaus Fuchs and Harry Gold both appear in a counterintelligence file, but upon closer inspection, we see two entirely different journeys leading to the same endpoint. Fuchs, a German-born physicist, entered the Manhattan Project after leaving Germany due to his refusal to accept the fascist regime. With a solid academic background and a deep research position, he had direct access to nuclear weapon design data. Importantly, he was acutely aware of the strategic implications of the knowledge he possessed. He once stated that sharing information with the Soviet Union was necessary to prevent a world dominated by military monopoly. While no one confirmed whether this was the true reason, or merely a post-facto justification, it is clear that Fuchs acted with proactive awareness, and the ability to anticipate consequences. In contrast, Harry Gold, a chemical technician, did not engage in strategic research, and did not directly handle technical data. His role was to serve as an information liaison between knowledgeable individuals and the recipients within the intelligence network. He claimed he was merely fulfilling his assigned tasks, without analyzing or understanding the full impact of what he was relaying. However, investigations confirmed that all documents sent by Fuchs had to pass through Gold before reaching their destination. Legally, Gold was considered the link that completed the transfer process. Passivity sometimes does not lessen responsibility. It can make the behavior harder to detect. A person who does not ask questions rarely creates suspicious signs. Both were arrested in 1950. Fuchs was sentenced to 14 years in prison in the UK, while Gold received a 30-year sentence in the US. At that time, US law evaluated actions based on the degree of betrayal of citizenship, while the UK considered the factor of idealistic motive. When one person acts out of understanding, and the other acts out of obedience, is the responsibility attributed to the knowledge that guides behavior, or to the silence that participates in completing it? Is the danger found in the autonomous decision of someone who understands the implications, or in an action occurring simply because no one in the system asked the right questions at the right time? Part 3. When an era allows knowledge to escape control. To understand why both behaviors, one stemming from cognition, and the other from obedience, can occur fully without being timely checked by the system, we need to return to a historical moment where the context created a gap for knowledge to escape the confines of control. After World War II, the world entered the Cold War phase. The threat no longer lay on the battlefield, but shifted to the realms of intellect, technology, and information control. The Manhattan Project was seen as a symbol of Western strategic superiority, stemming from the belief that the US possessed a sufficiently large technological gap in nuclear capability to maintain its position for at least a decade. However, this system was built on the assumption that the participants were loyal to national ideals. While many scientists, like Fuchs, had experienced ideological shocks from wartime, and were influenced by complex political currents. Unlike military forces, the research community of that time was not directly monitored for political stance or thought bias. They were evaluated based on professional competence, allowing access to strategic knowledge for individuals with independent thinking who did not always align with national policy. This created a gap for action based on personal ideology. As in the case of Fuchs, meanwhile, links like Harry Gold operated in the technical layer, an area often undervalued in the security system. They were not decision makers, thus not subjected to deep scrutiny, but it was this unremarkability that became the condition for actions to occur quietly. Legally, the US focused on preventing acts of betrayal from a citizen perspective, while the UK assessed based on impact and ideology. However, both systems lacked a mechanism for evaluating the risks of intellectual behavior, which is non-violent, but strategically influential. The era they lived in prioritized rapid scientific development over controlling scientific thought, and when the nation prioritized the speed of advancement, the question, what does this person think and what can they do with the knowledge they possess, was often left behind. So is the fault rooted in the individual actions, or in an era that inadvertently placed people in positions of power, without corresponding oversight? And when knowledge becomes the strongest weapon, can a nation exist safely if it only controls actions without overseeing how knowledge is perceived and used? Part 4. Klaus Fuchs. When knowledge exceeds control. In the context of science being strongly encouraged to develop after the war, but without a corresponding system of thought oversight, Klaus Fuchs became a quintessential case of how knowledge can establish its own direction beyond the control of the state that possesses it. Born in 1911 in Germany, Fuchs left the country in 1933. After the fascist regime came to power, he was influenced by the leftist ideological trends among intellectuals of that time. When he moved to England, and later became a participant in the Manhattan Project, he was one of the few who held core data about the structure and functioning of the atomic bomb, information that could reshape the global balance of power simply by escaping the scope of control. There is no evidence that he was coerced or bribed with material benefits. The transfer of information to the Soviet Union took place from 1943 to 1945, while the war was still ongoing. Notably, Fuchs claimed that his actions were motivated by the goal of balancing military power, to avoid a scenario where one nation possesses absolute power. Whether this argument was a justification, or his true perspective, it illustrates that he acted with full awareness of the nature of the knowledge he held. He was not led, he made his own choices. In counterintelligence investigations, the fact that an individual acts from thought and knowledge can create risks much greater than acting under orders. The British court sentenced him to 14 years in prison, a relatively light sentence considering the strategic consequences, but it reflects how the legal system evaluates intellectual motivation. However, it is precisely this element of intellectual autonomy that makes Fuchs's case viewed as one of the most representative examples of how those capable of influencing are not the ones wielding weapons, but those holding information and deciding how to use it. So in a national system, should knowledge be regarded merely as a resource, or should it be monitored as a form of independent power? And if those who possess knowledge are able to act without support from the system, can the state predict and prevent this through traditional security methods? Part 5. Harry Gold. A seemingly small link, but not to be underestimated. After analyzing the case of Klaus Fuchs, a person who acted with awareness and intention, we turn to a completely different type of security risk, Harry Gold, the technical link, who did not actively create information, but played a role in facilitating the completion of action smoothly. Born in 1910 in the United States, Gold did not participate in strategic research, was not a scientist in a weapons project, and did not grasp the significance of the documents he transmitted. However, he was the one who executed the transportation and connection between intelligence nodes, ensuring that information from Fuchs reached the appropriate recipients in the Soviet Union. In his testimony, Gold asserted numerous times that he did not fully understand the long-term consequences, and that he was just following orders. However, in counterintelligence investigations, honesty does not equate to harmlessness. An action carried out without any internal resistance is precisely the factor that makes information transfer easy. Gold's compliance without questioning made him one of the least suspected links, as his actions were purely technical, not exhibiting any clear political motives. The important point is that he did not need to understand the entire picture to inadvertently create strategic influence. If Fuchs was the initiator of the idea of knowledge transfer, Gold was the one who made that action a reality. In a counterintelligence chain, a non-initiating link can sometimes be more dangerous than one with intent, because the system usually monitors those with knowledge rather than those who merely execute. This is an important lesson in security. The unreflective nature of the executor, combined with the knowledge of the initiator, can create a complete gap. Gold was arrested in 1950. After Fuchs revealed the communication chain, the U.S. court sentenced him to 30 years in prison, harsher than for Fuchs, reflecting the view that the betrayal of a citizen's trust regardless of understanding is still dealt with sternly. This raises a deeper question: can a security system consider lack of awareness a mitigating factor, or is it the very foundation for dangerous behavior to occur unnoticed? And if a person merely following orders can contribute to altering the global power balance, is the greatest risk truly the intention to betray? Or is it the silent execution of actions when no one in the system questions at the right moment? Part 6, Direct Comparison. Active thinking, or completing action, which is the greater risk? When placing the two profiles side by side, the contrast between Klaus Fuchs and Harry Gold lies not only in their positions or technical roles, but also in the nature of how they engaged in the information transfer chain. Fuchs was the proactive one. He possessed knowledge, understood its value, and made decisions based on ideological reasoning. Gold was the executor. He did not create content, only transported it. But it was this very act that completed the whole process. If Fuchs was the one to open the door, then Gold was the one who held the door open. Both acted differently in thought, but contributed to a strategic outcome. Analyzing along the following axes. Motivation. Fuchs acted from ideals, whether right or wrong. It was self-determined. Gold acted on directives without full explanation. Degree of understanding. Fuchs had a clear understanding of the value of information. Gold only had partial awareness. Proactive or reactive. Fuchs created a starting point. Gold helped that starting point to become complete. Chance of detection. The proactive individual often operates in a high surveillance area. The obedient individual can easily conceal themselves under a low technical role. 4. Sentencing. Fuchs received 14 years in prison, UK. Gold received 30 years in prison, US. Reflecting how each system handled accountability. From an investigative perspective, both levels of behavior carry risks. Knowledge, when self-directed, can lead to paths beyond control, but actions lacking reflection can allow the chain to occur without hindrance. Notably, if a system only monitors those who possess knowledge, the risk may come from seemingly insignificant links that are precisely not suspicious, and therefore, not regarded as risk points. In counterintelligence investigations, it is understood that a behavior can be dangerous not only because the person intends to, but also because they can carry it out without being stopped. So what is the greater concern? An intellectual acting on free thought, or an individual willing to execute without fully understanding their participation? And if knowledge is the trigger, might it be that the very silence in execution is what makes that behavior a true strategic risk? Part 7, Legal Culture and Behavioral Psychology. When the system faces two different types of risks from two opposing modes of action, one based on deep understanding and idealistic thinking, and the other based on unreflective compliance, the responses of the legal system and the cultural framework of each country reveal different approaches to the same type of crime. Klaus Fuchs was sentenced to 14 years in prison in the UK. This decision reflects consideration of intellectual motives. The political context at the time of the act, the UK viewed his behavior through an idealized lens. As a reaction stemming from the independent thinking of the post-war research community, Harry Gold received a 30-year sentence in the US, a harsher penalty, even though he did not generate information. This reflects Western legal thought, particularly in the US, placing emphasis on the principle of loyalty to the nation, irrespective of the level of understanding regarding strategic impacts. From a criminal psychology perspective, Fuchs is a typical example of behavior based on intentional decision-making. He reflects, chooses, and believes that his actions hold value for balancing the system. When an individual possesses knowledge and acts on their own ideals, the greatest risk arises from their operation beyond the control of the organization. They do not require a supporting system to execute, only a belief in the direction dictated by their knowledge. Conversely, Gold represents a group whose behavior is based on habitual execution. Individuals like him may not direct their actions, yet they efficiently perfect these actions by not questioning them in counterintelligence investigations. This is a form of latent risk, as the executor is often not scrutinized as a controller. The lack of questioning from the system is a condition that allows the behavior to proceed seamlessly. The question arises, between those who act from thought and those who act from compliance, whom should the system monitor? A system that only oversees knowledgeable individuals will overlook performers. While, if it only checks performers, cognitive behavior may still find alternative pathways. Thus, should knowledge be monitored as a form of independent power, or should responsibility be emphasized at both the cognitive and execution levels? From a cultural perspective, a society that values intellectual freedom, but lacks a mechanism for evaluating thought orientation may create a gap for behaviors stemming from personal ideals. Conversely, a system that emphasizes discipline but does not encourage critical thinking may produce individuals who obey orders without full awareness. Both carry potential risks when placed in an environment with strategic elements. Counterintelligence investigations indicate that knowledge can be a source of ignition, but silence in execution serves as the trigger. Hence, when assessing security, what should be of greater concern? The overreach of thought, or the ability to act without consideration, and if a nation cannot simultaneously control both knowledge and obedience, what will become the first gap when a crisis occurs? Part 8, Conclusion. When knowledge exceeds limits, can the system keep up? When looking at the ultimate impact of the two cases, the most profound debate lies, not in how the actions occurred, but in the strategic consequences that those actions created. Many subsequent intelligence analyses suggest that information from Klaus Fuchs and Harry Gold helped the Soviet Union shorten its atomic bomb development program by 4 years. If that is accurate, the balance of global power in the post-war period was not affected by battlefield clashes, but by the process of knowledge transfer occurring quietly in laboratories and the technical steps taken quietly out of sight. One acted on ideals, the other merely fulfilled a duty, but both contributed to creating strategic change. Notably, the actions were not aimed at direct sabotage, lacked public actions, and did not cause immediate harm. They occurred in silence, based on the logic of knowledge, and the ability to refine the actions of a system that did not probe deeply enough into its links. Fuchs' case shows that knowledge can become a form of independent power, not properly controlled. Gold's case indicates that understanding the entire process is not necessary to contribute to refining the impact if the system does not ask the right questions at the right time. From a strategic perspective, knowledge is a resource, but a lack of critical compliance is what fully activates that resource. The cases ended with two different sentences, but their impact has since been regarded as one of the quintessential examples of the limits of security control through traditional measures. When actions are non-violent and do not cause immediate shock, the system sometimes fails to accurately assess the level of danger until consequences arise. Thus, the long-term question to pose is, in a world where knowledge becomes a strategic competitive factor, does the security system possess the capability to control both thought and behavior, or is it only when knowledge is used in unexpected ways that we realize the gap is not in protective capability but in how we evaluate and prepare? If knowledge exceeding limits can change the global balance of power, then in the following files, what we need to pose is not just who acted, but what did the system fail to see before the actions occurred. In the next part we will continue to delve into cases where knowledge was overly controlled, to see whether this helps prevent risks, or inadvertently creates a new form of resistance from those seen as the foundation of the system.